officially back to Lions football. It's Vikings week, and we have a few things to discuss. First off, we have to talk about this offensive line and where they need to grow heading into the second part of the season after the bye week, where they need to show some improvements, and why that could help the offense so much, especially a guy like David Montgomery and some of the inconsistencies that we've seen so far. Also, we got to hear from Dan Campbell, so we have some injury updates. Plus, on top of that, he also talked about what he feels is the most glaring issue the Lions must improve heading out of the bye week. So we're going to look at some clips for that as well. So let's get right into it. Now, remember, this video is being brought to you by MyBookie, so use code DOSE when you sign up for your first time with MyBookie. Let's start with this offensive line at first. And one guy that I have to give some credit to that I don't think we've talked nearly enough about so far this season is Graham Glasgow. Specifically going back to this Tampa Bay game, he was going to be matched up with Vita Vea a lot, and that was going to be challenging. And it was, especially for him as a run blocker. And he got beat up a few times on initial point of entry as a run blocker. That initial entry, he was a little bit off balance at times. Other times, he was just jolted backwards. But in terms of pass protection, really so far this season, he's been a good pass protector. He's only allowed 8 pressures, which you expect that number to drop when moving to the center position. But I think he's handled it really well. The depth that he's played with, his ability to give support in pass protection, picking up late blitzers, picking up stunts. I think there's been a lot of consistency. Play action sets, he's done a really good job with his angles and footwork. He hasn't been giving up easy edges and pass protection specifically. So I give a lot of credit to Graham Glasgow. He's got 2 young guards next to him, and I feel like he's really settled that interior unit, especially in that world for the Lions. Now, again, run blocking, he's not really a people mover, so I don't expect that. But you do give him credit for some of the biggest runs that we had against Tampa Bay. He did a nice job of sealing up to the next level, or specifically taking really good angles off the line of scrimmage, allowing us to get to that next level because of his ability to reach block a one technique. He did that pretty well in this past game. Again, Vita Vea gave some problems, but hitting landmarks and finding consistency there, being a pretty good combo blocker with Tate Ratledge, he's done a lot of good, and I wanted to give him credit going forward, especially of what he's doing in pass protection, really kind of settling in that entire interior offensive line as we move forward. Of course, where the issues have, and I think that transition has been good for him back to the center position. Where I do think we've seen some issues, of course, has been the 2 young guards, and that's where we definitely need the most growth. I also keep an eye on Taylor Decker because I thought Decker had a handful of missed blocks. We know it's a very athletic defensive front for Tampa Bay, but just a handful of missed blocks in the run game that led to some negatives. We also had that from the receiver position. We also had that from David Montgomery, which needs to get better. We also, we had it all across the board from tight ends. We had it across the board. But that said, though, speaking on these guards, this is the area where the Lions need to improve the most. And Dan Campbell spoke on that, saying that they've improved a lot since the beginning of the season or since training camp, and to now we still need a lot more growth because as they improve, the entire offense will improve. Right now, I think one of the biggest issues for getting David Montgomery going as a run on the run game is that there's just been too many negatives in the backfield for him. There's been too many missed blocks or missed assignments completely in the backfield, which has led to issues for his ability to actually get away from those and create positives. Too many things have died at the line of scrimmage for David Montgomery, and you attach on top of that, there's been a lot of longer developing runs that they asked of him. You get the counter runs or the wide zone runs, and these just take a little bit longer to develop, and he's not able to actually hit holes that have been created. You've had real windows created by these O-linemen, which has led to some explosives for Jameer. It's just that you feel like Jameer Gibbs has been able to get out of some of those bad spots more consistently than a guy like Dave Montgomery has, especially on some of these more elongated run schemes. And I think for the Lions, I start with Christian Mahogany because he is a guy that I feel like is on the doorstep, especially watching some of this recent film. He's on the doorstep of taking off for the Lions and being a great interior offensive lineman. As a run blocker, he's been very strong, and it does feel like going back to some of last year and especially going forward here, because one thing Dan talked about was putting guys in the position to be successful. It wouldn't surprise me if the Lions really try to lean on moving behind Christian Mahogany and the movement that he can create as the play side run blocker, because right now he's doing a nice job there. He still is a real people mover. He's moving athletically really well, and I think he's having a lot of success as a puller to this point as well. You're feeling a lot more body control. But in this past week specifically, we just saw inconsistencies when he was working on the backside and he'd have to seal off a run block, and you just get an immediate whiff or an immediate blown block or immediate blown assignment on that backside, and it would shut something down. We just saw a handful of those. Entry was just awkward. Something going back to college, as I thought that his body control was a little bit shaky. It was my biggest knock for him, and I think it's popped so far this season, and it's been an issue. But I also give him credit in pass protection because I think he's showing he's got a real anchor. He's got a very strong anchor against bigger interior defensive linemen that he can get to quickly and settle himself down. And he's also showcased a lot of range. He showcased good length. with some real reactive athleticism to open up range between gap to gap. I think there's been a lot of positive there. He can pick up late work for pass rushers, and he's given a lot of support in those spots, especially if he can get that from his center and from his running backs. But for me, there's just too many immediate losses for Christian Mahogany. And I think if he cleans that up just a touch, he could be really good as we move forward, right? He could be really good. And you just eliminate some of the obvious negatives. And I think it's kind of one thing that Dan was alluding to. He didn't bring up any player specifically, but like, okay, how many plays are you making for us versus how many negatives are we having on top of that versus, hey, you're not really making any plays, but you're not having any negatives. He's pushing guys around. You just got to eliminate some of the negatives, and I think that cleans up. This one Sunday is like a normal Sunday for all NFL fans. And there is this one app that rules them all. And its name is MyBookie. But today was different. Today, no NFL fans were in their seats. All living rooms were empty. Well, not totally. There was one NFL fan there, and his name was Dose. He was there to remind you. If you are new to MyBookie, use our code, and any bet you choose up to $500 is fully covered. Make your play, and if it doesn't hit, you get it right back when you opt in using your bet back bonus token. He was the only one there because at 12:59 p.m. Eastern on Sunday, every other fan stood up off their seat, walked downstairs, opened their front door, and ran for MyBookie. For survivor pools, same-game parlays, prop bets, and in-game lines. And with MyBookie, there was no better place to play. No one ever missed another opportunity to get in on the action. Football's back. Let's make some money with MyBookie. Whether that's, hey, use him as the gap puller or use him and run behind him. Obviously, you can't do that every play because that's just obvious. But I think the more you get behind Mahogany, the more you may clean up some of those issues. And then also, in turn, allow a guy like Tate Ratledge to potentially be more successful as we continue to work forward here. The big run that we had, kind of an inside zone, you create that combo block with Graham Glasgow and it pops. And you see the movement that he can create there. You see the movement Tate Ratledge can really create. And we've all seen the athleticism from him as well. He's moved well. You can see the wide zones. He has plenty of success with that on the backside. The problem is that you got some awkward entry. He's been on the ground just way too often. You got him on the backside kind of adjusting and trying to reset his angle so that he can get upfield. So he tries to cut off Vita Vea and then he just falls over his feet. You just get too much of that right now. And Tate Ratledge is also having way too many early losses in pass protection. Early hand placement has been messy for him specifically. We're seeing the athleticism, but you're seeing way too many inconsistencies alongside that, especially in pass protection, especially in some of the early losses that he's taking. And I think for him as a run blocker, the more that you can just lean on some of the athleticism that he carries, the more success that may come along with that. In Montgomery, you want things that probably hit a little bit quicker, right? That get a little bit more downhill. And I think we saw that on the big run from Tate Ratledge, like a straight dual run. Can he just push guys around? He seems to find some success there. Now, that hasn't always been the case, right? You get Christian Mahogany on the backside when they try to create a combo block, and that's just terrible. And by the time he steps up to that next level, there's no success there. And if you're not getting a healthy shoulder from Taylor Decker, how much can you really lean into that? That's a problem that you have to work through. We have to see where he's at coming out. But for a guy like Tate Ratledge, it makes it successful because he just pushes guys around. And he's really good when he gets his hands on linebackers. So I think you have to find a way to lean into that. It's part of the reason I think Gibbs is finding a lot of success. I think wide zone rushing, when you can allow him to just go chase down a linebacker off the backside and get upfield, he's going to have a lot of success there. And I think the more you can work behind Mahogany, you can find success there. But can you get a guy like Tate Ratledge to be really sound with some of these seal blocks where he can allow a guy like Mahogany to pull around off of his side so that you can springboard some of these runs where he can just push guys out of the play? And then in pass protection, how much of a growth can he take as we move forward here? Because that's the biggest area for him specifically, is just too many early losses from him. Messy body control has been an issue on top of that as well. Obviously, this interior offensive line, if it could take that step, this offense is going to take a big step in general. If you can get to more opportunities to allow Tate Ratledge to utilize athleticism, I think that's going to help him, especially if you can get behind him, get downhill quickly, or if you want to get behind Mahogany, if you can spread some things out and allow him to just go run, I think that could help. Depending on how you utilize some O-line splits as well, you could potentially really lean into that. I think a lot of this is going to depend on the growth of Mahogany. If Mahogany can really round out his game where you're not getting some of those immediate losses, he does a lot of things well right now. And if that's the case, I think it's really going to open the door for how you can utilize Tate Ratledge to help everybody out. So I think the growth of this O-line is really going to depend on the consistency of Christian Mahogany going forward. And the more that he finds that, the more I think this offensive line as a whole is going to have a lot of success, because you already have a lot of flexibility options with a lot of these guys. and it would really help out Tate Ratledge along the way. Speaking of that, I want to transition to some of these things Dan Campbell said, because he did give us some injury updates, like Terrion Arnold returning to practice tomorrow. There'll be something, they'll keep an eye on him. He obviously had returned to practice, but practicing again tomorrow. There's some real optimism, it sounds like, there from his availability potentially going forward. Also, a guy like Daniel Thomas, he only played 9 snaps this season against Chicago, injured. His clock started off of injury reserve. And same thing for Malcolm Rodriguez, which is a huge get back for the Lions, starting that tomorrow, according to Dan Campbell. So getting a guy like Malcolm back, there's been some reports of that, makes the linebacker room really deep. Zach Cunningham's been banged up, so you potentially can fill in a little bit there. Also, special teams value just shoots through the roof for Malcolm Rodriguez whenever you get him back. But this linebacker room has played phenomenal football behind this really good defensive front, and I think for now, be your strongest unit as a team as you move forward, as you're dealing with some of the injuries that you're dealing with, really leaning on what the linebackers can bring to the table. Malcolm Rodriguez, of course, is a huge part of that, and for the future, I think you want to see Malcolm get snaps to see where this could shake out in terms of could he be the starter alongside Jack Campbell as we move forward as a team. So a few big get-backs potentially there, but I also want to focus on what Dan Campbell said about this big issue, which is third down offense specifically for the Lions. And I just went through, watched some of the recent film that the Lions have put out there on these third and medium situations, because Dan Campbell didn't seem to think that it was much of a down and distance issue as much as it was just converting. And I think that comes from, if you just sort by 4 to 5 to 6 yards on third downs in recent weeks, if you just go through specifically that Tampa Bay game, that's about as bad as it gets. So Lions were just not finding success there at all. Outside of that, there's actually been some fine success, I would say, right? They only had one situation like that against Cincinnati, which turned into a sack, which isn't great. They were okay against Cleveland, a lot of good against Kansas City. The problem was this last game against Tampa Bay was very messy. And we had pointed it out just on Friday that I didn't feel like it was always a down and distance issue either, because, well, yeah, you don't want to be in third and long. They're not converting on 3rd and 4, right? You're giving up a sack there because you're having a blown assignment up front. And there's multiple things that I think have to improve. One of them being David Montgomery and pass protection has to be better. Like, that's just something that you trust from Montgomery. It was inconsistent this past week across the board. That just has to be better. I think it also stinks too, because when he's out there, the Lions aren't utilizing Jahmyr Gibbs in the passing game. So if they're blitzing backers, we need clean pickups. But then also, I would consider using Gibbs on those downs just as a receiver. I really would. See if you get a team that's like, hey, we'll put a linebacker on him or a safety on him rather than a cornerback. And I would test the team's ability to have that depth. If you're going to leave Monty in anyways, I don't think it's an issue to use Gibbs like a receiver and put him out there in some of the spots. I think it's a wrinkle the Lions could look into. But if we use some specific examples, like, again, going back to the Cleveland game, there was some success, right? You had the first big shot play in that quarters look where you just kind of clear out with J-Mo. You hit St. Brown in the broken play. That worked well. The wheel route that you tried to set up with the pick play was, you didn't really get much of a rub there from Jameson Williams, and it was kind of worked over top, so Goff threw a back shoulder. That one fell incomplete on the 3rd and medium. You also had the miss to Jameson Williams on the 3rd down and medium. You had a cover one. You had him one-on-one. He got held up at the line a little bit. And a side note to this, because we're going to talk about J-Mo more, a couple things I'd keep an eye on is trying to get him off the ball, whether that's stacks, whatever that may be, or just taking him off the line of scrimmage, trying to clear him up from some of these press situations. We'll talk about the route tree a little bit and some of the more underneath route tree you could potentially lean into, but really helping him with some of the timing by getting him clean off the line of scrimmage could also be beneficial. Put Tesla on the ball, put Laporta on the ball, and allow opportunities for J-Mo to come off a little bit more clear to try to utilize some of that juice that he really has. The pass was a little bit too deep for him. He didn't separate as much as you would hope on the catch and run opportunity, so that was incomplete. One big standout thing for me that I take away was getting a guy like J-Mo involved. I would really lean into looking for more catch and run opportunities. And I say that because Tampa had some success in some of that cover 4 stuff on 3rd down. And I think for us, looking at a J-Mo, instead of actually catching the ball on the 1st down line, if you could potentially give him some opportunities to catch and run for a 1st down, that might be a really good way to utilize him, right? If teams are going to look into that quarters coverage and play top down like that, or potentially look at some of the cover 1 spots and you're seeing them bracket in your best options, which is typically St. Brown and a little bit of Sam Laporta and at times Jameson Williams, I would look at J-Mo for some real opportunities for catch and run situations. And we'll talk about that here more in a second. 3rd down run that converted a 1st down in that game. Again, the Cincy one, you had, Sam Laporta on a heavy play action. You would have had him open with the safety over top. It was a tight window. Maybe J-Mo on the backside couldn't get to it. Manu loses block. That turns into a sack. Maybe the ball could have been out a little bit sooner there anyway. You tried to really sell the run fake and set that up. So that one's typical. We see that. And then Kansas City, there was actually a lot of good, right? I mean, there was a lot of movement in the back end. You get you get a cover one blitz, cornerback comes off the edge, Goff hits the slant flat route, it's wide open when they have to kind of work through the traffic. You hit the touchdown to Jameson Williams on the 3 match look where you get the vertical for Tesla, you pull the safety, you get the match, so you're clearing out that middle of the field with some of the high-low stuff underneath, and then you hit Jameson Williams, you allow him to catch and run into the end zone. That was a really good schematic look there. Another third down and medium, you get a man coverage look, and Goff has to take off and scramble. You can see they're trying to get Sam Laporta open. He's forced to take off, pocket strong in this spot. He, interior offensive line does a good job, opens up a really big lane for Goff to take off and run, which is something that no one ever really is going to account for. You had one that got short in that game where you tried to run it, one to St. Brown, where he just won against McDuffie underneath on the 3rd down and 3. He picked up 4 yards. So you had a lot of success in that game. It was really the Tampa Bay game where I think the issues started to really show up. Sack fumble, for example, where the timing was a little bit off, and St. Brown gets bumped a little bit, and they're using the linebacker to kind of take him away and bracket him in, and Goff holds on to the ball too long, waiting for that to open up, and you take the sack fumble because of that, and that's a play that we went through with the film there. But that one was just like, hey, man, the timing's just too slow here. They're trying to take away your best weapons, and you could see by the set that Decker was doing, you're expecting that ball to be out a lot sooner, and it wasn't there, so it turns into a strip sack trying to hold and wait for that to open up. Or you talk about the one that they did have open to Jameson Williams on the corner route where they go zone coverage, cover 3, and it's going to open, right? You kind of have that sail that's going to open up the deep corner, and Goff gets sacked on the play. You don't get a clean pickup for Monty. It turns into a sack. It's like it should have been there. The look was there. You just didn't have an opportunity to actually get to it on that play. That in general just has to be cleaner. Interior, but running back specifically, I expect that Monty is going to do better in that area. That's something that he knows that he needs to be more clean with as we move forward, especially when you trust him in those spots, because that's why he's out there. He's not out there on 3rd down to usually catch the ball. He's out there to block. So if he's going to be in there to block, then you have to be cleaner in terms of pass protection. It's just that simple. Had a defensive penalty, which ended up picking up a 1st down for you. You also had that miss by Goff, a little bit low, a little bit behind to Jameson Williams on the in breaker, right? That one was nice because it was kind of like playing off, okay, you want to take away St. Brown, we're going to go to J-Mo on this play. Similar kind of look, single eye safety, just missed him a little bit there. But the setup was there to get Jameson Williams the ball, and I think getting him more involved may be something the Lions have to look into as teams try to really focus on taking away the 1st and 2nd read for Goff, which is typically St. Brown, and then it seems like a lot of times it's going to Sam Laporta. Goff is looking at kind of that drag underneath the Khalif Raymond. That's not open, but that was kind of his second look after St. Brown fell down. And instead of looking at J-Mo, who's crossing the deep middle of the field, that one was potentially open. I think that's going to have to be more of an emphasis, is making sure that's strongly in your progressions against some of these man coverage expectations that you get. Of course, you're looking for guys to hit the line. You're looking for guys to hit the marker. You have Khalif Raymond working underneath for some catch and run opportunities. But I think J-Mo, you can look at him more for some catch and run opportunities when you're expecting man coverage in some of those spots. Because then again, that cover 4, you try to run the out route to St. Brown. That was jumped well. That was incomplete. Maybe you could have hit a drag there to J-Mo and had him take off and run, but maybe not. Maybe he cuts that off. I just think that's an element that I would look for potentially getting more involved. I would also look for a man, if it's not going to be that, definitely look for more Khalif Raymond. I think Khalif Raymond can be an offset to what Saint brings, where with Saint, you throw it to him on 3rd down a lot of times at the sticks. You're not expecting catch and run. You're just expecting him to catch it and pick up the 1st down and separate. Khalif Raymond's capable of doing that. In a lot of these instances, you're seeing Khalif Raymond separate. He's just not getting the look that high in the progression, or they're using him underneath for a catch and run opportunity. I would look at Khalif Raymond more so for this guy's going to be a separator. We can trust him to just get open in these spots. Lions typically don't do that, but I would look at him for more of those looks, especially when you get some man coverage, to just be a separator at the sticks. And then J-Mo, maybe look at him a little bit more for a catch and run opportunity. And I would even dabble in thinking about using Gibbs as a receiver in some of these spots. Maybe you have him in there as a back to pass protect if Monty has some misses like he did. Obviously, you have to get someone going that's not Sam and that's not St. Brown. And the obvious answer there is Jameson Williams. But I would also say maybe that's Isaac Tesla. You have to find a route tree that opens it up, because right now they really haven't found a route tree to trust that. So I think it's got to be J-Mo right after catch. It's got to be trusting more Khalif at the sticks, and maybe even dabble with Gibbs a little bit more involved in some of these looks to actually really present like, hey, we're trying to get him the ball. This is a progression with he's strictly involved in trying to get him open. Look, you want to get these guys the ball, and you want to, spread the ball around, but we have to convert, and that's the most glaring issue. We looked at it on Friday. It's below average in terms of 3rd down efficiency, and I think those are some of the ways that you can look at improving that. And obviously, I think rushing the ball on 3rd down hasn't as consistently been as successful, and I think a big part of that too is, again, you're younger at guard than you were last year. You don't have Kevin Zeitler in there pushing guys around, and if you're not going to change it up, which I've looked at the deadline stuff, it's interesting, but I don't think the Lions are going to do anything there. They want to see this growth, and they're getting growth. So I don't think they're going to make any move to be like, hey, we're going to go replace somebody, unless like Frazier was healthy or something, but I don't think they would make an outside move. So because of that, I don't think they need to. you may have more consistencies in the run game. So if you're not getting that rush game success, you have to find an expansion of that rush game on third and short where you typically would utilize that. And I think that just means the backs can still be involved, but you have to make them more involved potentially in the pass game than they have been to this point, right? I think that has to be something that you really consider, or maybe even of the ideas that we've done early in the year where you put a receiver at running back, right? Things like that where it's kind of just an expansion of, okay, now they're really expecting pass, and then we'll just hand it to St. Brown like we did early in the year. Something like that with the younger offensive line, rather than trusting to actually consistently all pick up their assignments and create movement, because right now you're not getting that, right? You're not getting those clean assignment pickups. So one blown block is blowing up a 3rd and 4 handoff where it feels like you have numbers, but one guy missed and now you don't have numbers. Something like that is something the Lions would have to consider, I think, being maybe more creative in those spots. But I'm going to leave it there. Let me know your shots. Again, shout out to my bookie for sponsoring today's video, and I'm out.